welcome to MindShock. This is your host, Bruce McGuire.
And yeah.
And today we have one of the most mind-shocking podcasts of all time. I mean, this one is really a doozy, even for MindShock.
You say that all the time, Bruce.
No. We're going to go over claims that that humans did go to the moon, but the first men on the moon were not the Americans. They weren't the Soviets. They were the Nazis from the Antarctica base.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And we have supposed evidence of that. And we have JR from an unspecified government agency going on the record for the first time regarding any kind of claim. So as always, if you find the MindShock podcast interesting and informative, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Okay, so JR, I know you can't talk about things U.S. related, but we are talking about Nazi Germany now. And this is truly mind-shocking. Now, it is not that mind-shocking that Germany during World War II actually pioneered the science of rocketry. I mean, some people actually believe they were assisted by either extraterrestrials or some kind of interdimensional entities channeled by the Vril Society. And the Ahnenerbe, I mean, this is where a lot of people don't know this. 90% plus, supposedly, of Germany's budget, it wasn't going specifically into the war. It was going into these occult research societies and occult trips and building bases in Antarctica. I mean, that's not cheap.
Yeah. You're a gem, Bruce. Never change.
Okay, so let's go over this article from the highly credible express.co.uk website. First men on the moon shock claims of Nazi lunar landing from Antarctica base. The Nazis were the first to land people on the moon, beating U.S. astronaut Neil Armstrong to it by 27 years, according to a loony conspiracy theory. I mean, what makes it loony, though? Like, is there credibility here? We will examine this in typical MindShock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront, attempting not to fall for any logical fallacies like appeal to incredulity or genetic logical fallacies, where illogical people focus on sources instead of the merit of the argument being presented and the evidence itself. So this article is by John Austin. This is posted July 24th, 2017. The Nazis landed a spacecraft on the moon 27 years before U.S. astronaut Neil Armstrong set foot on the lunar surface, or allegedly, during the Apollo 11 mission. It has been shockingly claimed. Adolf Hitler ordered a crew of Third Reich astronauts to visit the moon in 1942 in the middle of World War II, according to the Looney Theory. You know, see, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, JR. If nobody ever found evidence, let's say there was no evidence discovered of all of the Nazi bases in Antarctica, New Schwabenland, and all that. Let's say no evidence was discovered. Would anyone actually believe that? That in the middle of World War II, Nazi Germany is going to randomly go to Antarctica and build bases? That's kind of a loony claim also. Like, let's say there was no evidence discovered of that. Who would actually believe that?
Okay, I could see that from, like, I can understand that, but they had motivations to conquer the entire planet. What I don't understand is, with Nazis landed on the moon first, with all of the anti-American sentiment and European Union sentiment that was generated, why wasn't that part of their propaganda? Like, we went to the moon, but they can't. Like, I mean, look at North Korea and the way that they autonomously generate, like, their democracy sentiment. Like, you know, it doesn't really sit well with me for the fact that, like, How are we just
Oh, well,
learning about this now?
well, that actually plays into the possibility the theory is true because there's a great answer for that. If it was all for the purpose of militarization, they wouldn't want anybody to know they went to the moon. If their goal, I mean, I don't think they actually publicized going to Antarctica either. That wasn't. I don't think that was news at the time that they
Yeah, but
did.
like, but setting up bases in Antarctica also gives them nuclear strategy and everything else. You don't necessarily have that same concept with the moon.
All right, hold on, hold on. Let me finish. You might have much greater firepower. Like, let's say if they really do have this some kind of secret, like the leaps and bounds that they developed rocket technology. I mean, it really is curious because before, like, there were just such giant leaps in technology with Nazi Germany. It almost, even for the most devout coincidence theorists and scientism cultists, it it almost forces them to seriously look at the possibility that the Nazis somehow got advanced information from other sources, advanced knowledge. Now, they why are they spending such a huge portion of their budget on occult research and mediums channeling entities from other dimensions? Like, it's not like they were spending like 5% of their budget. According to all their books, unless that's all inaccurate, according to all their accounting, they were very meticulous. They're spending all their money with this Vril Society and then Ananarbe branch of their secret government agency. And so they're going to Tibet and into these lost caverns in Tibet. They're looking for the lost city of gold in the Amazon. They're going to Antarctica. I mean, this is not cheap to do in the 40s. So like they could have been building a much bigger army and focusing on victories close to home, but instead,
Honestly, Bruce, the same thing could be said about Ludwig II, but he decided to bankrupt Germany by building Castle Neuschwanstein. So,
okay, that's the most non-congruent argument I've ever heard. But anyway, so
well, I mean, it like they might have done it for. They didn't do it for the money, obviously. Like
no,
they
no,
did it for. They had other
obviously
motivations.
not. But when there's that amount of money and resources put into something, perhaps, perhaps they were able to tap into some kind of secret technologies. I mean, it is kind of curious that, like, with the Die Glock and the Nazi UFOs and so-called anti-gravity propulsion systems that they developed, regardless of how successful they were, they did do test flights. They have them on video. You can watch them. They're quite interesting. So regardless of whether or not they were as successful as they wanted them to be, so with the Die Glock, like they're developing all this UFO technology. I mean, it is curious. Like one can't help but wonder what the connection is to like the Vimana and all these ancient craft in like ancient India and all of this Hindu mythology that featured all this advanced technology. So is it possible that the Nazis really did tap into some lost, secret, hidden, or interdimensional technology? Because if they did, I'm not saying that's true, untrue. This is MindShock. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. But if that was true, and they were able to develop these bases in Antarctica, which they did, to however rudimentary level, if they were more advanced, if they actually did get to the moon and have these secret military bases on the moon, perhaps they also had other secret technology which would enable them to target sites on Earth, like either laser based technology or whatever. Even if they didn't have it necessarily developed to a certain degree, if that was the goal, then they would clearly want to keep that under wraps. They wouldn't be using it as some kind of propaganda campaign like the Americans or the Soviets were with their space races.
Right, but you're also talking about their space race occurring before the propaganda that the U.S. and Russia were engaged in. And on top of that, I mean, is there any physical evidence that they ever made it to the moon? I mean, how come, I mean, for all we know, they were building bases in Antarctica simply because, like, they were trying to mimic and replicate the harshness of having people exist in that type of harsh environment to eventually go to the moon. Just because, like,
well, they could have just they could have just did it in the Arctic. It'd be a lot cheaper and closer because they already had whatever submarines going there. But hold on a second. If there was hard evidence, like we're going to go over what evidence there is, and then we'll examine how hard it is. But if there was hard evidence, wouldn't there be a vested interest in the powers that be, whether it's the US or the Soviet Union, which pretty much as they did with Operation Paperclip in the US, where they secretly basically hired all of Germany's best scientists and Nazis and all these people and just had them work for the US government. And the Soviet Union also took a lot of their scientists and put them in positions of power. That's a little bit less well known because it was all kept under wraps. But if there was hard evidence, wouldn't also the US have a vested interest in keeping it covered up? Because how bad does that make everybody look if Nazi Germany was actually even more technologically advanced than anyone knew? And then if they stole their technology, they could never admit that they stole it from the Nazis. That looks bad too. So it kind of does. I'm not saying this theory is true in any way, but if it's true, it does add up on the side of the conspiracy that it would all be kept covered up. Because if it were true, it doesn't make any sense how any of that they would want any of that out there.
Right. Okay. But then, like, okay, if that's the case, then how come people that are pro-Nazi, how come they haven't like come forward and tried to illustrate this?
Well, some of them. Well, first of all, some of them have, but if they don't know about it, how can they come forward with it? We're going to examine the existing information. I know you like to play the contrarian, JR, but let's continue here. Conspiracy. I like the words that this author uses. Conspiracy theory cranks believe Nazi spacemen walked on the surface of the moon using rocket craft developed by Hitler's top scientists. Bulgarian research, and also of note, I mean, von Braun, who was a Nazi scientist, he was the one that came over to NASA that allegedly developed the rocket technology. What if it was developed earlier? Is that really that much of a stretch? But anyway, getting back to the article here, Bulgarian researcher Dr. Vladimir Terziski claims he has evidence of the Reich's successful mission. The engineer and physicist suggest, so this isn't a random conspiracy theory crank. This is an engineer and physicist, Bulgarian researcher, Dr. Vladimir Terziski. He's not some random guy living in his mom's basement coming up with random theories. So the engineer and physicist suggests the Germans developed a space program with their World War II allies, the Japanese. Reports Daily Star Online, another highly credible publication. You know what's funny though? Has anyone ever done a direct comparison of, let's say, Daily Star versus New York Times or any of these other? Because the mainstream news is their track record is so horrible. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the track records were quite similar.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't believe in any media, Bruce, to be honest with you. Like, to me, like 90% of it is bullshit anyway. I like the facts.
It's kind of hard to get those.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Especially today, like you would think that, the United States government invented the internet, as a variety of different resources. One of those was supposed to be like the instant transferal of information. Isn't it interesting how that got muddled?
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, continuing this article, remarkably, Dr. Terziski gives lectures across the globe on his crackpot theory. You gotta love the impartiality of this article. He even claims the Germans set up a base on the moon after the end of World War II. This ties in claims that the defeated Nazis fled to Antarctica after the war and ran their covert space program from there. Nazi scientists led by SS General Hans Kammler, who oversaw Hitler's rocket program, were said to be behind it. The secret Antarctica base was called New Schwabenland, according to Dr. Terziski's lectures. He also claims tests were carried out from the Nazi bolt holes in South America, where many leading officers did escape to. The expert believes the rapid rise in UFO sightings from the 1940s were Nazi test craft. He said the Germans landed on the moon as early as probably 1942, utilizing their larger exo-atmospheric rocket saucer of the Mieth and Shriver type. Ever since their first day of landing on the moon, the Germans started boring and tunneling under the surface. By the end of the war, there was a small Nazi research base on the moon. So you know what's interesting though? I don't know if they're going to tie this in here. We might have to do a separate episode on this. But supposedly, a lot of alien abductees, UFO abductees, they did claim that their abductors were wearing Nazi uniforms. I mean, that's kind of a random claim, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, not
it
just
is.
one or two. I mean, there were supposedly dozens of these sightings. I mean, obviously, out of thousands, a few dozen might not appear to be much, but that is a curiosity. So, carrying on with this article here, however, the theory has been blasted as pure fantasy by academics. Colin Summerhays, a geologist at the University of Cambridge, published a 21-page academic paper to disprove the existence of the supposed secret Nazi UFO base in the South Pole. He concluded the Germans did not construct the secret base before, during, or immediately after World War II. What's curious, though, I mean, there's actual footage of them there, though. So how would, without visiting, unless Colin Summerhays actually went there, how would he know? Is he just spinning propaganda damage control? I mean, that's the cult of scientism always does that. They pretend to know things. I mean, if he actually went there and explored every single inch of Antarctica in New Schwabenland and went every single place that the Germans were proven to have went and found nothing, then okay. But I don't think he did that. So, however, there was a
No,
huge.
I don't think he did either. And on top of that, like, there's things still get, even though there's very little snow in Antarctica, things still get buried, like, as well. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm not saying that, like, whole structures would, get buried in that span of time, but, like, the little minutia that was laying around a base would. And it would
I mean,
take a little bit more than just.
there's a lot of seemingly blotted out territory in Antarctica on Google Earth. Make of that what you will. He concluded however, there was a huge interest in space flight among the Nazis. Germany did have advanced rocket technology, which was used to develop the terrifying V1 and V2 weapons, which rained down death on Britain. The Third Reich also developed the flying saucer, the Horten Ho 229 flying wing, which often feeds the theories of Nazi UFOs. And former Nazi rocket scientists were instrumental in getting the real first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong. The U.S. recruited Nazi scientists to help develop the space program that saw Apollo 11 land on the moon in '69. Their help was in return for them not facing justice over war crimes. I have to interject here again, though, because wouldn't it be more plausible, even more plausible, that they would want to recruit these Nazis if they had already been to the moon? Because if they already knew they had developed the technology, wouldn't that make them want them even more because they already proved they can do it?
Um, yeah, I mean, you would think, but
I'm just
I don't know.
postulating. I'm just postulating. It started in 45 after Germany's surrender when the U.S. began recruiting Nazi scientists to help with the continuing war effort against Japan in the Pacific. The men responsible for the deadly V-2 rocket, which rained down on London during the Blitz, were pardoned in exchange for their cooperation. Many of them were later instrumental in the development of the U.S. space program. So that's that article there. There's one more. So this is from the Daily Star. Nazis landed on the moon. The truth behind the shock claims Hitler reached space. Nazis landed a rocket on the moon 27 years before the famed Apollo 11 mission. It has shockingly been claimed by Henry Holloway, chief reporter, July 23rd, 2017. Adolf Hitler sent a crew of Third Reich astronauts to the Earth's orbital body in 1942, according to the outrageous theory. Nazi spacemen walked on the surface of the moon using craft developed by Hitler's top scientists. Conspiracy nuts claim. You gotta admire how objective this article is. Bulgarian researcher Vladimir Terziski claims to have evidence of the Reich's successful missions to the moon. The engineer and physicist shockingly states the Germans developed a space program with their World War II allies, the Japanese. Daily Star Online can now reveal the truth behind his extraordinary claims and the Nazi scientists who did help the man reach the moon.
Okay, but by the NASA's supposed, moon project, the first orbital spacecraft was actually Apollo 8. It wasn't Apollo 11. Apollo 11 is when they actually did the first step, but the first orbit around the moon took place with Apollo 8.
Well, that
And
was
ironically,
still the '60s, though. Like we're talking about here, this theory is alleging that.
oh well, no, it happened beforehand. I'm just saying that it was not Apollo 11. Ironically, Apollo 8 was Jim Lovell was the commander as well. Buzz Aldrin was Jim Lovell's bitch, and it's funny because like even Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin was like Neil Armstrong's bitch. So I just think that's funny. Actually, I'm not sure. Cullen might have been. Oh, Cullen was he might have been. Well, he was definitely the ship's commander. Anyway, we'll have to revisit our NASA podcast. Regardless, yes, they. It was, what you're claiming or what the article is claiming is before. Definitely happened before NASA, but I was just going to clarify that for you, Bruce.
Because he's giving
there is
lectures.
No evidence.
I would like to know what he's giving the lectures with, though. Like, what is the base? Because is he actually showing the documents that he has access to?
It sounds made up. Like it probably is. It sounds like it's like a really good sci-fi like thing. They existed just before the space program. So like they probably had a lot of base ground research, and that's probably all legit. But the fact that like they're walking on the moon, like that would have scared the hell out of the U.S. Like they wouldn't have gotten involved with trying to help Britain if like they were capable of doing that.
No, I don't think so, because if they were capable. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes we don't know, because we have to do a dedicated podcast on this, but the UFO battles in Antarctica, I mean, there's a lot of evidence of that. I mean, there's congressional records of Admiral Byrd actually being sent there in these gigantic UFO battles. Was it between the Germans, or did the Germans have interdimensional or extraterrestrial help that decided to shift the balance and they stopped backing Germany? And they were, because according to other theories, supposedly aliens.
No, let me tell you, the U.S. side of this. They went to Germany with suitcases of money and bought off the scientists. They came to America and NASA was born, Bruce.
No, I'm not talking about Operation Paperclip. I'm talking about before that. I'm talking about during the war, if extraterrestrial alliances shifted. Like, there's so much we don't know. So we can't.
Well, that was Operation Paper before the clip.
I'm having trouble finding this guy's supposed evidence.
Does that really shock you, Bruce?
It actually kind of does, because you would think he would present something, even if it's made up. Like, where is it? Unless it's been censored.
If it had to do with, the Trump election, I could see. But, I don't think so.
Like, what is he saying at his lectures, though? Like, I want to see if I could actually find footage of some kind of lecture. All right, here we go. I found it. All right, so the only thing I could really find here is on conspiracyrevelation.com. It's a WordPress site here, and there's an entry here from March 2nd, 2019. German moon base, Vladimir Terziski. German moon base Alpha. I don't know what this excerpt is from, but the Germans landed on the moon as early as probably 1942 using their larger exo-atmospheric rocket saucers of the Meath and Shriver type. The Meath rocket craft was built in diameters of 15 and 50 meters, and the Shriver-Walter turbine-powered craft was designed as an interplanetary exploration vehicle. It had a diameter of 60 meters and had 10 stories of crew compartments and stood 45 meters high. Germans had gained advanced technology in the early 40s, possibly from recovered crashed UFOs or through contact with an alien culture. This article by Vladimir Terziski, president of the American Academy of Dissident Sciences. I mean, that's an awesome name, isn't it, JR? is a
Yeah.
study of the Germans' involvement in the exploration of the moon and Mars. Hold on a second. Did they also make it to Mars, JR? We gotta ask John Lear about this. In my extensive research of dissident American theories about the physical conditions on the moon, this is an excerpt from an article by Vladimir Terziski himself. In my extensive research of dissident American theories about the physical conditions on the moon, I have proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is atmosphere, water, and vegetation on the moon, and that man does not need a spacesuit to walk on the moon. A pair of jeans, a pullover, and sneakers are just about enough. Everything NASA has told the world about the moon is a lie, and it was done to keep the exclusivity of the club from joinings by third world countries. All these physical conditions make it a lot more easier to build a moon base. Ever since their first day of landing on the moon, the Germans started boring and tunneling under the surface, and by the end of the war, there was a small Nazi research base on the moon. The free energy tachyon drive craft of the Hanebu 1 and 2 type were used after 1944 to haul people, material, and the first robots to the construction site on the moon. Okay, we have to do a podcast on Nazi robots, JR. How advanced were the Nazi robots?
Well, I mean, considering that like the ancient Egyptians had batteries, Bruce, I'd say that they're probably pretty advanced.
Yeah, we need to do a podcast on ancient robots and automatrons because those were pretty crazy. When Russians and Americans secretly landed jointly on the moon in the early 50s, this theory keeps getting better and better, doesn't it, JR?
I'm on the edge of my seat, Bruce. Please don't stop now.
With their own saucers, they spent their first night there as the guests of the Nazi underground base. In the 60s, a massive Russian American base had been built on the moon, and that now has a population of 40,000 people, as the rumor goes. After the end of the war in May 1945, the Germans continued their space effort from their South Polar colony of New Schwabenland. I have discovered a photograph of their underground space control center there. There is no such photograph in this article here, but I'm going to try to find it, but I'll continue the article here. How much evidence would you actually need to accept this theory? Like, let's say he had all these old photos and videos and a few whistleblowers. Like, would that be enough?
Well, you know, Bruce, why don't we just start with one photo and we'll roll from there?
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I haven't been able
Fair,
to find
fair enough. Fair enough, Bruce.
Yeah, that's fair enough. German-Japanese military research and development cooperation. According to Renato Vesco, Germany was sharing a great deal of the advances in weaponry with their allies, the Italians, during the war. At the Fiat experimental facility at Lake Garda, a facility that fittingly bore the name of Air Marshal Hermann Göring, the Italians were experimenting with numerous advanced weapons, rockets, and airplanes created in Germany. In a similar fashion, the Germans kept close contact with the Japanese military establishment and were supplying it with many advanced weapons. I have discovered, for example, a photo of a copy of the manned version of the V1, the Reichenberg, produced in Japan by Mitsubishi. The best fighter in the world, the push-pull twin-propeller Damier 335, was duplicated at the Kawashima works. Or a photo of a Japanese high-ranking Imperial Navy officers inspecting the latest German radar station.
So wait a minute, like you're talking about how like now UFOs are built by Mitsubishi?
These aren't UFOs; these are just rockets and some weapon system. I don't actually think any of this is disputed because they were allies. So I think there is other evidence of them sharing tech. A Japanese.
Well, I was just like, I mean, because I just think it would be kind of cool, like, it was kind of like back in the day when you go to the Galankathon, like, you just get inside your UFO, like, Forenza, like.
Yeah. A Japanese friend of mine in Los Angeles related to me the story of his friend's father who worked as a technician in an aircraft research bureau in Japan during the war. In July 45, 2.5 months after the war ended in Germany, a huge German transport submarine brought to Japan the latest of German inventions, two spherical wingless flying devices. The Japanese R&D team put the machines together following the German instructions, and there was something very bizarre and otherworldly standing in front of them. A ball-shaped flying device without wings or propellers that nobody knew how it flew. The fuel was added, the start button of this unmanned machine was pressed, and it disappeared with a roar and flames without a sign in the sky. The team never saw it again. The engineers were so frightened by the unexpected might of the machine that they promptly dynamited the second prototype and chose to forget the whole incident. Japanese wonder weaponry created in conjunction with Germany Foo Fighters, the Führerball artifacts. These are remote-controlled spheres which are sent against the enemy with supposed electromagnetic effects in aircraft or simple psychological weapons for frightening enemy pilots. Wasn't there a UFO Files episode on this? I actually remember reading about this before. These weird spheres that attacked aircraft. Do you know anything about this, JR?
I can't say that I have, Bruce, but I can't say that I haven't. Like, yeah, it's just a little blurry. Like, you kind of caught me like off the spot with like this particular podcast. So, I can get back to you on that.
All right, fair enough. Weapon identified as an AEG Kugelwaffen sent to Japan via submarine and long-range aircraft technology transfers. Several of the Kugelwaffen are seen trailing Sally bombers with the gunners making no attempt to shoot them down, suggesting that they were being tested. Encountered in the Pacific after Germany surrendered, the 20th and 21st BGs reported these weapons in over 300 sightings. Nice segue there. First landing on the moon by the Germans was at Mare Imbrium on August 23, 1942, at 11:26 MEZ using a Mieth rocket. The first man on the moon was Lieutenant Warner Theisenberg of the Kriegsmarine. Actually, the Navy did most of the work on the moonshots, not the Luftwaffe. Landing took place without radio contact to the main control center at the Wilhelmshaven or the second control center located near Anzio, Italy. Ever since their first day of landing on the moon, the Germans started boring and tunneling under the surface, and by the end of the war, there was a small Nazi research base on the moon. One question that I have not answered yet in the affirmative is how were the Germans able to regenerate the air inside the craft for 8 months for this big crew? Quite probably they were using advanced life support systems developed initially for their larger Walter turbine and free energy submarines that were cruising the oceans without resurfacing. The radio message with the mixed news was received by the German Underground Space Control Center in New Schwabenland and by their research base on the moon. The Andromeda was a craft with a diameter of 139 meters that was meant to transport troops, up to 5 saucers, and equipment. It was probably not built, although they could have done it easily. Maybe some of the flying cigars that have been seen are later models. Journey to Mars. Are we already there? Jules Verne and other early science fiction pioneers wrote what was then considered to be far-fetched stories about the exploration of the moon and the planet Mars. They based their classic literary works not just on their own fertile imaginations, but on wild rumors circulating that such voyages had already been made, accomplished by a group of scientists, all members of the same secret society. They had tapped into an unknown power source, using it to facilitate the birth of flight years before the Wright brothers. Contacted by this secret fraternal order, Nikola Tesla, are you surprised by Tesla's involvement in this?
Not by the least.
Furthered their cause, coming up with his own improved method of interplanetary travel, soon to be stolen and used by Adolf Hitler and the New World Order. 47 years after World War II, in 1991, Vladimir Terziski, a Bulgarian immigrant, came into possession of some German documentary film describing the Nazi V-7 special weapons program. The secret V7 projects were in fact a series of circular aircraft research designs developing radical new weapon platforms that could rise and descend vertically and fly at high speeds and very high altitudes using a new implosion motor design and other electrogravitic energy conversion principles, producing a self-sufficiently electrostatically generated force for power. That was a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Such engines were manufactured by AEC, Allgemeine Elektrizitätsgesellschaft, the great electrical giant of industrial Germany, for this program as early as 1944. These power devices generated their own electrogravity field, which neutralized the Earth's natural gravity, in effect making them weightless. Another new engine principle used helium for fuel. There were at least three major developments within the V7 program. There were the Haunebu models 1 through 3 at least, and Vril models 1 through 7 as well, and most likely beyond that. And then there were the cylindrical mothership carrier projects designed to transport the Haunebu and Vril craft in flight. Research along those lines has been carried out since early 1941. The Haunebu models were larger discs ranging from 25 through 40 meters in diameter, that is 75 to 120 feet. They were designed by multiple ganged energy units working together like the AEG system, and these units also generated their own electrogravitic field, which neutralized the natural gravity around them, thus making the craft and all it carried essentially weightless. Experimental versions of the circular disc-shaped craft carried 1 to 3 7.5 centimeter anti-tank cannon on their underside. Photographs of such craft have been collected by Mr. Terziski, some of which also appeared in the movie documentary. One picture shows a 2.5-ton military truck parked beside a Haunebu 2, a lifting crane on the far side, and two men under the big disc working on something. Other pictures showed the Haunebu models in flight. The Vril models were smaller, deeper discs of nearly bell-shaped configuration in appearance, with three hemispherical protuberances underneath, very similar to the bell-shaped flying objects photographed by George Adamski in 1952 and 1953. However, the Vril 2, which is closest to that appearance, was actually being tested in 43 and 44 in Nazi Germany. The Vril 3 models and beyond were far more streamlined and looked more like the domed discs we are more familiar with. These little ships were 10.5 to 15 meters, 30 to 45 feet in diameter, and carried crews of 1 to 5 men. The cylindrical carrier craft were over 100 feet in diameter and could carry one or more of the Haunebu models and three or more of the smaller Vril models, all internally, and could launch and recover them in flight. When the high command in Germany concluded that they could no longer win the war, and some of the key leaders began leaving the country to prepare for a resurgent Fourth Reich, those important programs were apparently dismantled and carried to new bases in the Antarctic and to remote places in Brazil and elsewhere in South America. Most of their key scientists went with them, which may be why we have heard so little of these programs up to now. The few scientists who remained behind were picked up by the US and Russian governments and put to work on domestic programs, but our programs lacked the organization of the parent German programs that were evacuated. Of course, none of this report is proven by mass support evidence, nor should we expect it to be, given the secret nature of the work. And so this information can only stand as a speculative report, but it does raise a lot of unanswered questions. Vril, Haunebu, and the Andromeda Gerat were never mentioned by any source before Vladimir Terziski hit the scene. This is the same writer who claims to have proved that there is a breathable atmosphere, water, vegetation, and even animals on the moon. Strangely enough, his descriptions of conditions on the moon sound an awful lot that those were described by George Adamski in Inside the Spaceship. The fact that Terziski has obviously drawn heavily from Adamski's various writings seem to make no impression on those who want to believe in the existence of German flying saucers. They tend to characterize the similarities between the Haunebu and Adamski's Venusian scout ship or the Andromeda Gerat and Adamski's mothership as corroborative evidence. Well, here's the thing, though. If they were true and they're both telling the truth in some kind of mixed capacity, that would add up.
I mean, I guess, like, Okay. All right.
I'm still trying to find these photographs. I want to know what this documentary film that Trzynski's talking about, because again, if there was no footage of the Nazis in Antarctica, nobody would believe it, right? But since they found all this footage and then all the documents and records, now I don't think anybody is questioning that it's fake that the Nazis, developed or at least explored New Schwabenland to a certain extent. I mean, it still appears on the maps because the Antarctic Treaty uh, revolves around whoever gets there. It's claimed by them, so New Schwabenland technically still exists in Antarctica.
Well, okay, yeah, but like it would. I mean, nowadays, like, I mean, they might not necessarily like admit that it's there, but like they might, like, that would be the type of thing you would have to write like the Council of Antarctica about.
You know what else is kind of curious though? Nazi and NASA, are those kind of similar words? Nazi, NASA? It's a little similar, don't you think?
It's a little bit. It'd be interesting to see like what like NASA translates to in German.
In Hebrew, it means deception.
Well, there's not a flag right there for you.
Well, not to mention, if you go really deep into the NASA conspiracies, the NASA symbol is a serpent's tongue, the top of the serpent's tongue, and it appears in every single mission logo.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going down some deep rabbit holes, but yeah, I mean, it's really curious too. Also, I don't know if you watched Iron Sky. It's basically some kind of it's basically built surrounds this concept. I'm having trouble finding Terziski's presentation. Have they all been scrubbed from the internet?
You're asking the wrong goose, Bruce.
Actually, I think I found something. I mean, why is this all so dense? I mean, there's actually so much writing about this. I mean, if it's all clearly fake, like why is there so much here? All right, I found something. You're gonna like this. So Vladimir Terziski himself wrote this, which is hosted now on bibliotecapleiades.net. This is an old school site that's been around forever. So this lists a lot of what we already went over. There is no photograph still of this claimed photograph that he said he discovered. There are other drawings and schematics here regarding the engineering of the craft. There's also a lot of documentation of like advanced weapons, microwave weapons. I mean, a lot of this is corroborated. Another interesting curiosity is the all of the UFOs being sighted around the world coincidentally align with the timeline here of this German development with UFO technology. Is that a coincidence? I mean, there were obviously some more ancient UFO sightings. There were sightings from the 1800s, but they seem very, very few. Like there's a dozen or so. And then starting in the 30s and 40s, all of a sudden, there's just tons of UFO sightings all over the world. Is that a coincidence?
I don't know, Bruce. I have to say, like you've named some like convenient things, but I'm still waiting for the photos.
I'm trying to. I want the documentary film he's talking about. That's what I want to see. Because again, there was legitimate footage. You could find it I mean, it was in multiple documentaries. When they finally got the legitimate footage of the Nazis in Antarctica, I don't believe any of this footage existed until what, the 90s or something. A lot of this was in sealed Soviet files, and some of it never came to light until after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that's very curious because all those years nobody would have believed this, right? So how curious would it be, how interesting you think it would be if this footage actually surfaced one day of them actually landing on the moon? The Nazis, that is. And it would
It would
how
be
funny would it be?
interesting, but it would be surprising.
I mean, I don't know. I think it would be interesting, especially if it actually looked real, unlike the Apollo footage we have. I mean, there's just so much overlap here. I mean, even the battle for Los Angeles. with the 1942 Los Angeles battle with all the UFOs. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And how that's conveniently right across the pond from Japan. And they were supposedly testing all of these German aircraft. You know what's interesting? Here is supposedly a verified account here. During a routine inspection of the Japanese merchant vessel Osamu Maru on January 21st, 1940, in the Indian Ocean, officers of the British cruiser HMS Liverpool discovered 21 German civilians on board. All were highly qualified technicians being sent to Japan to service German surface raiders and U-boats soon to be operating in the Pacific area. The technicians were removed and interned as prisoners of war, but as Britain was not at war with Japan at the time, the Osamu Maru was allowed to proceed to her destination. Some weeks later, February 29th, Britain handed back 9 of the technicians to Japan after Japan agrees not to send them back to their homeland. So that's curious. There seems to be corroboration of Germany and Japan working together, which, I mean, that's not that surprising. They're allies in the war, but okay. So here's another reference here to the German-Japanese flight to the moon and Mars in 1945, 1946. You know, another interesting point, though. If they really do have technology advanced enough to go to the moon, and if it's that advanced, it can go to the moon quickly, is it really a bridge too far to believe that they could also go to Mars if the technology is really that advanced?
No, no, it's not. But I mean, it's still a bridge.
Yeah.
You know, like.
So supposedly, this is again, this is some interesting information here. So supposedly, this underground German documentary movie from the Fuel Society, the only produced craft of the Hainubu 3 type, the 74-meter diameter naval warfare dreadnought, was chosen for the most courageous mission of this whole century, the trip to Mars. The craft was of saucer shape, had the bigger Andromeda tachyon drives, and was armed with 4 triple-gun turrets of large naval caliber, 3 inverted upside down and attached to the underside of the craft, and the 4th on top of the crew compartment. The volunteer suicide crew of Germans and Japanese were chosen because everybody knew that this journey was a one-way journey with no return. The large intensity of the electromagnetogravitic fields and the inferior quality of the metal alloys allowed them for the structural elements of the drive was causing the metal to fatigue and get very brittle only after a few months of work on the drive. You know what's kind of believable about all of this is if they really had this high level tech that they got elsewhere, or they reverse engineered from UFO craft, or they got some information from channeling interdimensional entities, it would make sense that they're trying to fit this technology into their own technology, like these metals. Because if they don't have metals in these other dimensions, the best they can do is with their own. So even if they have, like, let's say these advanced anti-gravity devices, they wouldn't necessarily work well with our metals. So it makes sense that they would have some of these problems, even if the technology was that advanced. That makes it like
That's true, but like a one-way ticket somewhere don't mean shit to me. Like, you know, I mean, like.
Well, I'm just saying, if this is all made
There's
up,
a lot of like evidence that the Russians shot one-way missions into space. You don't hear about any of those people.
Oh, the lost cosmonauts. We need to do a podcast on that. Supposedly, there's audio recordings of them dying.
Does that really shock you?
Not really. But anyway, if this is all fake, I have to give them credit for at least going through the minutia and coming up with these like little details of how like the metals are failing, even when they have these like super advanced tachyon anti-gravity drives. It kind of makes it more believable. I gotta say. So the flight to Mars departed from Germany 1 month before the war ended in April 45. It was probably so they weren't just sending people to the moon from Antarctica. They were sending people to Mars from Germany, allegedly. It was probably a large crew, numbering in the hundreds because of the low level of automation and electronic controls inside the saucer. Most of the systems of the craft had to be operated like those on a U-boat of that time, manually. Because the structurally weakened tachyon drives were not working with full power and not all the time, the trip to Mars took almost 8 months to accomplish. Again, that's semi-believable. It's not like they're going super sci-fi 1 second, they're there, bam. I mean this is semi-plausible. If they have
Well,
the
okay, but like you also have to have the resources on board to keep eight, like
well,
whatever people alive for 8 months.
supposedly these were like really gigantic craft. An initial short thrust towards Mars was probably used to overcome the strong gravitational field close to Earth. After that, the craft was coasting for 8 months in an elliptical orbit to Mars with its main drives turned off. Later trips to Mars by the joint Soviet American craft in 1952 and by the Vatican craft of the Marconi project from Argentina in 1956 reached Mars in only 2 to 3 days because their drives were working during the whole flight, accelerating in the first half and decelerating in the second. So the Vatican is also making missions to Mars. What do you think? What do you think of that, Jr.?
Um, well, I mean, that's kind of sounds loony from the beginning, but when you really think about it, the Vatican's been involved in a lot of shady things.
So if this is all true, you're not surprised.
Nothing surprises me anymore, Bruce, to be honest with you.
Smaller Kohler converters were probably used to power the systems and life support equipment on board. I do not have any information at the present time about any artificial gravity capability. I like how he has all this other information, but he doesn't have any information at the present time about any artificial gravity capability on board the craft. But that could have easily been done with the large anti-gravity drives of the ship. After a heavy, almost crash landing, the saucer slammed to a stop, damaging irreparably its drives but saving the crew. That happened in the middle of January 46. The crash landing on Mars was not only due to the crippled tachyon drives of the craft, it was also due to the smaller gravitational field of Mars generating less power for the tachyon drives, and also due to the thinner atmosphere on Mars that could not be used as effectively for air breathing as Earth's atmosphere could. The craft was shaped as a giant saucer, a form that is very efficient as an air brake when it is entered into the atmosphere with its huge cross section perpendicular to the trajectory of the descent.
Bruce, does it bother you though that tachyon sounds like something that would come out of like a Star Trek franchise?
Actually, no, because they actually stole that from. So tachyons are actually physics particles. In physics, they're particles that travel faster than the speed of light, also effectively disproving Einstein's relativity.
I know, but the way it's being thrown around, doesn't that sound really Trekky to you?
Well, all of that is based off of tachyon. Like Star Trek used this as the base, so not really.
I don't know. It sounds Trekky.
The thing is, they were theorized in 1967, so it is a little curious how he's referring to them after the fact. So I would want to see these documents he's talking about. Does it actually say tachyon, or did he translate that? Because I'd be curious to see that, and also verification of the age of these documents this guy allegedly has, as well as the alleged film he has of all of this.
Yeah.
One question that I have not answered yet in the affirmative is how were the Germans able to regenerate the air inside the craft for 8 months for this big crew? Quite probably they were using advanced life support systems developed initially for their larger Walter turbine and free energy submarines that were cruising the oceans without resurfacing. Another curiosity here, again, I have to give this guy credit. It's not like he's pretending to know everything. He's specifically saying things he doesn't know, which leads a little bit to credibility. I mean, if this is all fake, I have to give this guy credit. It's pretty well thought out fakery if it's all fake. The radio message,
Right.
the radio message with the mixed news was received by the German Underground Space Control Center in New Schwabenland and by their research base on the moon. The Andromeda was a craft with a diameter of 139 meters that was meant to transport troops, up to 5 saucers, and equipment. It was probably not built, although they could have done it easily. Okay, so this is all very, very curious. I still want to know, where is this evidence? But let's get into a little bit more curious territory. Because Vladimir Terziski also has a lot to say about the alien grays. Are you ready for this, JR?
Go ahead.
Nazis and the Greys. Researcher Vladimir Terziski believes, in spite of all the descriptions of aliens given by abductees, that there are also craft constructed by the Illuminati, which are taking advantage of the alien question by attempting to pass off their own black projects as alien technology. Although Terziski is uncertain as to the existence of the so-called Greys, he does admit his belief in an ancient human-like society which possesses anti-gravity craft. Terziski states that whether or not the Greys exist, the New World Order may be using the external alien threat as a means to bring about world unity after the fall of Russia, while at the same time hundreds of valid but undesirable ET contacts with more advanced races are debunked or ignored by the government. If some researchers are correct, Bavarian intelligence, the Illuminati's Skull and Bones Society, the Thule Society Nazi Empire, the CIA NSA network that was germinated from within the Bavarian Illuminati, and the Bavarian Thule Societies are actually working with the Greys in secret. It's kind of impressive how they roped all that in, isn't it? I mean, they roped everything into that one. Even if the New World Order declares war on these creatures as opposed to a grassroots human existence, one can be assured that this war will be a farce, as have other conflicts in the past. So perhaps some kind of blue beam insinuations here. It would very well be like the Korean War conflict, where socialists within the UN waged a no-win police action against Southeast Asian communists. General George Douglas MacArthur, for one, accused the socialist leadership of the UN of intentionally sabotaging his forces in Korea by leaking American positions to their communist allies. Do you know anything about that, JR?
No.
Now, in recent years, patriot organizations have been warning of a possible Red Dawn takeover of the U.S. by socialist UN troops, who now have an increasing army of UN troops training within the borders of the U.S. If such a takeover attempt were to occur, we would suggest that the UN complex in New York City increase its security by at least 1,000-fold to defend itself from the retaliation that would follow. Let's just say that there is an entire army of grassroots patriots walking in the wings to defend America from such a threat if or when such an invasion is attempted. The Bavarian National Socialists who ultimately control the UN, such as the Trilaterals, this guy's roping in everything. This is kind of impressive. Are reportedly tied in with the reptilian Grey Empire. So it is doubtful that any resistance to the invaders will come through the Trojan horse United Nazis, or excuse us, the United Nations. Such a war, in quotations, may be the grand finale of a series of outward Machiavellian conflicts, which the Bavarian Empire has allegedly arranged between nations over the centuries for the purpose of simply keeping the human race in the state of disorder, chaos, confusion, and fear, which is so necessary to ensure the final goal, an absolute electronic dictatorship in which every human will be tagged and branded like cattle with an electronic chip implant, which will make the absolute spiritual, mental, and physical slaves of the New World Order. Keep in mind, this was written many years ago. I don't have a date here, but this article is probably 10 or 20 years old. Multitudes may be deceived into receiving this mark of the beast or the serpent, and in doing so will have relinquished the greatest thing that they possess, their free agency, and with it their soul. Terziski alleges that the Illuminati has been involved in top-secret space research and development since the turn of the century, and that the Nazis, the American Eastern Establishment, and the KGB has been involved as well. I mean, I'm just endlessly impressed by this guy's ability.
Yeah, this guy's not paranoid at all. Like, I don't think this guy, like...
This guy's ability to connect this many dots in this little time, because this is only a few paragraphs, and has he connected almost everything in the conspiracy field? I mean, this guy's roping in everything.
Yeah.
In other words,
I have to say, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. In other words, the lower classes of all of these nations were themselves largely unfamiliar with such top secret research, although the Illuminists, working in the highest levels of internationalism, were and are intricately involved. Although it may sound rather incredible, Terziski alleges that he possesses confirming information, such as the first video expose of Nazi UFOs. German Japanese saucer landings on the moon and Mars in 1944 and 1946, Marconi groups landing on Mars in 56, video footage of Nazi interplanetary dreadnoughts, and of secret Soviet American saucer landing on Mars. And he produced one video here. Now, before we get to the video, we have to appreciate this guy's allegations here. So he's not simply claiming the Nazis went to the moon and the Nazis went to Mars. He's claiming that there were German-Japanese saucer landings on the moon and Mars, Marconi groups landing on Mars in 56. I mean, there's multiple different groups here doing these landings. I mean, you gotta admire this guy's versatility in tying dots together and coming up with narratives that seem plausible if you accept the basis that they're built on, that there is advanced tech. Because obviously, if there's no advanced tech, they're not doing any of this. But if there is advanced tech, then the plausibility exists. Now, here is a curious video. Actually, hold on a second. Let's finish with this guy. We're almost done. There's only a couple more points here. He's about to rope in even more. I mean, this guy's impressive. I have to say it. This guy is impressive. Although many of the grays have been described as neo-sauroid configuration, other grays pose a different mystery as to their origins and seem to be more of a biosynthetic or manufactured configuration. Vladimir Terziski suggests that some of these grays may be, quote, a product of the U.S. government's biogenetic cyborg research and development program.
You need to have this guy on MINDSHOCK, Bruce.
This guy's hitting all the bases. JR, what do you know about the government's biogenetic cyborg research and development program?
I'm not at liberty to say, Bruce, but I have to say, what I can say is that this guy needs to either be subscribed to MINDSHOCK, or better yet, we need to fly this guy from whatever rock he comes from and have him as a guest on MINDSHOCK.
I think he's a professor at the University of Missouri.
Well, we'll come to him. I mean, seriously.
He actually he's a Bulgarian-born engineer and physicist. He actually graduated cum laude from the Master of Science program at Tokyo University in Tokyo in 1980. Okay, call me crazy, but I would say this leads to even more credibility because he's a Bulgarian guy. He's a professor in Missouri in the U.S., but he actually graduated from Tokyo University in Tokyo. So he actually had connections in Japan and could have theoretically talked to a lot of people in Japan specifically about this information.
Bruce, even if this guy is completely full of shit, it would be interesting to just sit there and have a beer with the guy.
I mean, yeah, I'm very impressed here, JR. I am very, very impressed.
I mean, seriously. I mean, I'm seldom left speechless, but even if the guy is completely full of shit, the fact that he's able to fold all of that into, a web article? I mean, where's this guy's book?
Hold on a second. Let me see.
Yeah, we need to do a podcast on this guy's book. Because he's got a book. If he's willing to let that go in a simple.
Okay, so he's got a few different books. Close Encounters of the Foo Fighter Kind. Did World War II Germany invent and build the first operational fighter saucers on Earth? He invented a new word too, like a fighter saucer. I've actually never heard of that before.
He sounds like perfect MINDSHOCK.
So he might have been interested. So I just searched his name on Amazon. That's the only book that comes up, and it's actually out of print.
Well, you go to Abe Books and look it up.
All right, hold on a second. His name also appears on a bunch of DVDs. Alternative 3, The Evidence of the Leaked Cover-Up by Vladimir Terziski. And there's actually a photo of a guy giving a speech. I don't know if this is Terziski himself. But he's also appearing in Omnek Onek, My Life on Venus, and Alternate Views of the Universe by Vladimir Terziski. So what does he know about Venus? Because we didn't even get into Venus yet.
I just know that, I mean, if he's on, like, DVDs, that means he does guest shows, guest
No, it looks
appearances.
like they interviewed him for segments. It doesn't look like, because I don't think that this isn't about him. It's by other people. It's just, it appears that they interviewed him. Project Paperclip Volume 1, I was teleported to the surface and to the inside of the moon and Mars. German UFOs and other suppressed alien technology, Volume 1. The Illuminati elite mind control influences on the subconscious mind. Don Kelly's free energy, anti-gravity, and gravity-altered falling magnetic magnet. German UFOs and other suppressed alien technology, Volume 2. German UFO Foo Fighters. Project Paperclip Volume 2. Father was an overseer of the trainers for the aliens.
The fact that he's got UFOs and Foo Fighters in the same line alone is...
terrestrial component of the alien presence. So he was interviewed for these. So it does look like it's him. I mean, you would think people would have uploaded this to YouTube by now, but it's, man.
Well, it was probably ripped down as, like, fake news or misinformation because, I mean, you know, like, it's not part of the regular mainstream political machine.
Oh, wait a second. I found something. JR. I found a clip, and this is on the International Criminal Tribunal for the Former Yugoslavia YouTube channel. Oh, actually, here we go. I found somebody did upload his lectures. He's got like some kind of a PowerPoint presentation or something. And he's got diagrams here. I'm gonna have to go through this later. This is a fascinating individual, JR. This is a fascinating individual. But let's get back to the biogenetic cyborg programs here. There may have been a secret society ties behind the Axis alliance of World War II. Are you ready, JR? The Jesuits Order of Italy, according to researcher Edmund Paris, had strong connections with Adolf Hitler's SS and, in fact, may have been working with the Thule Society of Germany in establishing the SS as the premier German intelligence agency. In turn, according to Trevor Ravenscroft, the Nazi occult lodges were in close contact with the occult Green Dragon Society of Japan. This is the most impressive guy I've ever... JR, I have to say, in the endless years of conspiracy research, this guy is the most impressive researcher I've ever seen. What were you saying?
Who's Ravencroft? Like, what's his name?
Trevor Ravenscroft is a occult researcher. He is actually credits him. He's self-described as the world's leading metaphysical historian. He wrote The Spear of Destiny and The Cup of Destiny. And
I wonder if he's to Thrall's Ravenscroft.
Who was that?
Oh, he was the voice of Tony the Tiger. They're great. He also sang You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch.
At this point, would you be surprised?
No, not at all.
Okay, so let's continue here. Italy, Germany, and Japan were the three members of the Axis powers who fought against the Allied Alliance, the U.S., Great Britain, and to a lesser degree, Russia. Terziski is a Bulgarian-born engineer and physicist, graduated cum laude from the Master of Science program of Tokai University in Tokyo, 1980. He served as a solar energy researcher at the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences before emigrating to the U.S. in 1984. International UFO researcher with a command of English, Japanese, Russian, German, and Bulgarian. Okay, I have to say, is this guy some kind of super genius? So he can speak fluent English, Japanese, Russian, German, and Bulgarian. That does give him a leg up on other researchers for World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive, JR. He's also the creator and lecturer of Ufology 101, the course for university-level attendance. In June 5th, 1993, interview with talk show host Sam Russell on K-Talk Radio in Salt Lake City, Utah, Vladimir Terziski made the bold assertion that in one way or another, any independent scientist who discovers the secret of electromagnetic free energy anti-gravity propulsion is soon bought off, blacklisted, or killed by the Bavarian Illuminati, which has for centuries been extremely determined to maintain their monopoly on such technology and keep it out of the hands of the masses. The military arm of the Bavarian Empire, the Third Reich, was allowed to field test much of this technology under supervision during World War II, as the Bavarians were intent on establishing the New World Order by force if necessary. Terziski also stated that a joint German-Japanese suicide volunteer crew utilizing this confiscated Illuminati free energy technology, a Hans Kohler converted power dreadnought, a giant craft approximately 230 feet in diameter, landed on Mars in mid-January 1946 after 8 months of heavy flight. He did not say what became of this expedition, but he did state that the German Illuminati had established a base on the moon and had planted their swastika flags there years before the Apollo program. Do you think it's weird, or what would you think of it if that suicide mission that went to Mars, if they actually survived there and they're still there and they've actually, reproduced and there's a whole bunch of them now?
Um, well, I would say that there would probably still have the age-old human genetic trait of inbreeding. That might be like a problem. But
If there were hundreds of them that went there, I mean, it might not be an issue.
true. I don't know.
Terziski also stated that a secret joint American-Russian space program, behind the scenes of the public program, had landed men on the moon before the Apollo flights as well and had discovered the ex-Nazi base already in existence there. See, to me, call me crazy, JR. Call me crazy, but to me this would make more sense because again, call me crazy, I don't see the egos involved here of them actually allowing a live broadcast of a first time moon mission. It would seem more plausible that if man has ever landed on the moon, they landed on the moon before. And this was just like the public reenactment for the credit.
I don't know. It'd be interesting that trip to Mars, though, if that was called Total Recall.
That is very interesting. One of the more startling claims made by Terziski in this interview was that the German experiments in mind control, genetics, hybridization between humans and animals, which were apparently aided by the discovery and perfection of the microscope in Germany, included a Teslan scalar wave microscope, which helped the Germans to unlock the human genome, which repeated in 10 times their intensity in the underground Nazi South Polar colony or city. I mean, would you say it's awfully convenient that the Germans are they're discovering all of this new technology, rocketry, propulsion, and then also microscopes, chemistry, biology, like they're making these huge leaps in every single field? Do you find that awfully convenient or coincidental?
I mean, it could be coincidental, though, Bruce. Like, it
I
might
mean,
not
anything
just
is
be.
possible. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. I just find it strange. But if they were in some kind of channeled contact with advanced entities from other dimensions, it kind of it explains it a little bit on how they were able to make these gigantic leaps. Because we're not talking slow progress here. Slow progress is very believable. There's slow progress in every field. But these gigantic leaps, I mean, it's kind of tough. It's tough. This base city rumor has it. It is known by its inhabitants as the New Berlin and contains a population of over 2 million people loyal to the Nazi philosophy. Okay, hold on a second, JR. Do you believe there's 2 million people living in Antarctica in New Berlin? And if there are, is that why the UN Antarctic Treaty exists, to prevent anybody from finding out about this?
Well, I was under the impression the Antarctic Treaty existed so that, like, no one could specifically colonize Antarctica. On top of which, if they have the Nazi belief system and live in Antarctica, which I'm guessing they probably didn't bring a coven of Jews with them, and they probably weeded out any other race that's not of the Nazi belief, then they're probably living in harmony somehow in Antarctica.
I don't know. That's a tough one, but We're about to get crazy here, JR. I know we're already crazy, but it's going to get crazier. So these include the so-called purebred Aryan SS who apparently utilize slave labor to expand their underground empire. The genetic experiments in this underground metropolis, as in the trilateral Dulce, Dreamland, Luna facilities, is reportedly continuing unabated. Now, we obviously need to do a separate podcast on the Dulce. How do you pronounce that?
I don't know.
The
I don't know.
Dulce.
I say we send Project Amnesty over there to make sure that they're okay, though.
The Dulce base, as this was actually purported first by Phil Schneider. We're not going to get into him, but conspiracy theorists are well familiar with Phil Schneider and him going public with certain things. So Terziski claims that German occultists gained entrance to underground repositories below Tibet with the help of Aramanic and Luciferian secret societies in that country, where they gained access to ancient records from an early civilization which developed its own form of occult technology. I mean, this is impressive. We're getting to Tibet here as well. According to Vladimir, the Nazis had made contact with half a dozen alien races, including the malevolent reptilians, which may explain why they were so successful in their technological pursuit. Could the U.S. government, fearful of the Nazi Empire alien gray empire alliance, have chosen to negotiate with this powerful force rather than stand against it? If you can't beat them, join them. If so, it may have been a tragic, pathetic, and cowardly decision, not only for themselves, but for their and our posterity. Apparently, the German Nazi Illuminati had established a pact with the serpent races long before the American secret conventional hybrid government had done so. The South Polar Base, according to Vladimir Terziski, is also actively involved in space travel. And if the theories of W.A. Harbinson and others are correct, they may in fact constitute the Aryan Blondes who have been working with the Greys and Reptilians in UFO scenarios in an attempt to abduct, implant, and program the minds of humans in an apparent long-term agenda to conquer the minds of the nations and therefore the nations themselves. Failing to do so during World War II in an overt manner, is Bavarian Draconian Alliance now attempting to bring about a covert takeover of the planet from their South Polar installation. So what do you think of all that, JR?
Well, seldom have you left me speechless, Bruce, but I have to say, like, I mean, and drugs aren't involved. Like, I mean, it's interesting how, like, they didn't talk, they brought about all these things, but, like, they never mentioned any kind of, like, druggings or anything like that. I mean, isn't that kind of curious? Like,
Yeah, I mean it's bizarre. I found an excerpt of one of Vladimir Terziski's articles authored by himself in Steam Shovel Press #9. Secret research, but this is actually hosted on umsl.edu, the University of Missouri, where Terziski is a professor. Secret research on anti-gravity and space flight organized by the German secret societies during World War II. So again, this is not some random WordPress blog. I am reading this from umsl.edu. In my research as a physicist, I have gathered a vast collection of anthropological stories about anti-gravity flying devices from different cultures and times. Being fluent in Japanese, Russian, German, and English on top of my native Bulgarian, and being able to read professional literature in several other languages. How many languages does this guy know? In several other languages, in addition to the Japanese, Russian, German, English, and Bavarian, has helped me tremendously in my research and my efforts to penetrate the veil of secrecy around this blacklisted advanced technology. As a rule, I do not discard any bizarre story when I hear it, clearly. I will simply post it in the big mental picture of such posted messages until there is a second similar story, and so on. In my public lectures on the West Coast, I have traced with an extensive slide presentation of documentary evidence the general physical characteristic and theoretical arguments of anti-gravity and UFO propulsion through academic and tabloid sources, through modern UFO lore and ancient myths and legends, and again through some modern day revelations through science fiction sources and contactee reports. The unexpected conclusion was that anti-gravity is extremely easy to produce with any advanced alien or sci-fi hardware. Simple rotation decreases the weight of a spinning body, and if you spin the hell out of it, it will lift off and fly away. I like these technical scientific terms he's using. Spin the hell out of it. Again,
Yeah.
this is on umsl.edu. I have to say, I've never been so interested in actually going to a live lecture as I would like to actually see this guy's lecture, wouldn't you?
It would be interesting.
Yeah. It will lift off and fly away. Anti-gravity as a physical variable is proportional to the rotational inertial momentum of the spinning body and to the angular velocity. In more colloquial terms, to the product of the mass and the rotational velocity of the spinning body. Armed with this simple theory, I was able to even answer the question of how to build a better flying saucer. From the slow spinning of brute heavy masses to the relativistic spinning of high frequency fine energy fields with very little mass around the stationary hull of the craft, this is the road towards the design of a solid state anti-gravity drive without moving parts. The fact that anti-gravity is very easy to produce with the available hardware of our crude, by extraterrestrial standards, technological era is no surprise at all, keeping in mind the similarly easy way to produce hardware-wise technology from other blacklisted for mass consumption by the terrestrial secret society's field of research and development, like free energy, alternative cures for AIDS and cancer, environmental cleaning technologies, etc., etc. Anyone who has studied extensively metaphysics and paranormology knows that the higher the mastery of the universal laws, the simpler the hardware to achieve the same technological goals becomes. See, this is a really interesting concept. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone put it in those terms. Have you?
No.
The more advanced races in the universe achieve all our science fiction goals with the power of extremely small gadgets, and finally with the power of their minds alone. The blacklisting of an advanced spaceflight propulsion technology that is more than 100 years ahead of its time is not very startling, keeping in mind that this is the very mode of operation of the terrestrial secret power elite. The evilarchy that rules the. That's an I've never heard that term. Is he just making up terms here? In that, not the oligarchy, the evilarchy that rules the planet from behind the scenes. How they usurp, hoard, and lock behind triple vault doors the most. And this is just an excerpt here. The rest of it links to the Steam Shovel Press website, which is apparently, I believe it's a UMSL publishing company. And so that's the part of the article there. So the last thing we're going to go over here is an actual video. So I don't know what this is. This was aired in 1977 on the program. So I don't know what from W. Cooper. So theoretically, this could have been some American-Russian joint mission. Travel in the Mind in the Galaxy. Okay, so I don't know what this is, but this is an interesting video here. What's interesting is this was aired in 77, and supposedly the description here is a landing on Mars in 1962. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. I don't know what to make of this. Supposedly, it's a reconstruction of a real event. So you think they just filmed that on Earth and then just put a red filter on it or something?
Yeah. Just give me a second here. Yeah, I don't know, man.
And would it be curious? I've always found this idea fascinating that any kind of real footage would be passed off as fake footage so nobody would ever question it. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm also skipping through Terziski's lectures here. He has interesting schematics. Most of them are hand drawn. I don't know if these are translations or what he's doing. I still don't see any actual photographs, real photographs of the bases or anything, but I'll keep going through it. I'll see if I find anything, I'll post it and we'll do a follow-up episode. But I mean, whether this guy's just made all this junk up or not, clearly he's a highly intelligent man.
Doesn't that seem kind of convenient, though, that they happen to land, like, right next to something where there's no dust, and it's just, like, moving away, like...
Well, according to this guy, he's saying that the atmosphere is very similar to Earth, and it's not what is being purported.
That's fine, but what about the thing that's underground that's, like, you know, like, what is that? Like...
Don't ask me, man. I don't know what any of this is. It's just kind of... I don't know what to make of this guy, but I have to say it is impressive how he was able to link almost every conspiratorial concept together. And he's also he's also not very famous. Like apparently, I mean, there's a Vladimir Terziski on Instagram as well, but he's only got 396 followers. So this guy's like fairly unknown in the conspiracy world. As like I've never heard of this guy before. Like he's not like a Bill Cooper or a Phil Schneider or any of these other guys. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
What are your final thoughts?
I'd have to really rewatch that. Like there were certain parts of it that seemed disingenuous to me, but it could also be that like I would just have to watch it a bunch of times.
That's still kind of impressive footage if it really was shot in the 60s or the 50s or whatever. Like, because how did they shoot that? That looks kind of real. So did they shoot that somewhere on Earth? And if they did, has that been identified where exactly they shot that?
Yeah, I don't know.
So we'll continue to explore Terziski and a lot of this other information in typical mind shock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront without falling for any logical fallacies, or at least attempting not to, like all these other podcasts and documentaries that immediately get triggered and the cognitive dissonance goes into full swing. I mean, again, I don't know if any of this stuff is true or untrue. This is mind shock. I am not claiming anything is true or untrue, because how would we know? If you guys found another edition of the MindShock podcast interesting and informative, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing out.
And Jared having out.
Catch you guys next time.
I will say that the footage looks like kind of like sketch, but the guy himself seems interesting. Like I would like to probe him deeper. You know what I mean? Like I don't immediately associate that footage with the guy you were talking about because
I'm not saying it is. That was just the only thing I could find. I'm
not 100%. Like I kind of feel like they're riding on that guy's coattails because like. That footage seemed like it was...
That wasn't linked to his name. That was just linked by someone else as saying, as a question mark, is this footage related to what this guy's talking about on this mission? I haven't found anything that's him claiming that this is his evidence. It was just the only thing anybody could find. And they just they uploaded it and posed the question, is this related? And they didn't even put his name in it. They were just like, if you read the description of the original, I think I sent you the AI upscaled version to high def, but in the original version, it just says, is this related to like the conspiracy theory about the American German, whatever. I think they even got it wrong. Like, because Terziski was specifically alleging it was either, whatever, America, Russia, Germany, whoever. I mean, it's kind of crazy because he alleged multiple missions to the moon and Mars, not just one. So, I mean, this stuff is just kind of fascinating because there's enough of like because he does have a bunch of photos of just like random German rockets being developed. So, like, that stuff's real, and he seems to have a lot of evidence on the communication between Germany and Japan. But then he's building on those claims and making these extraordinary claims, which of course we have no direct evidence of. But I'm actually I found a few videos of his lectures and presentations with like projector presentations. I'm actually gonna go through all that. So we'll see.
Cool.